Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Arikal Bloss, South Bend resident, activist there. You've definitely kept me in the loop, what's going on the ground there. And honestly, I would say you've put out through your social media and other platforms more reporting on the true nature of Mayor Pete Buttigieg than most of the media there. So we see the new poll where he is in the front of the Iowa pack. There's been a lot of talk about he could heal the wounds of America and bring people together, this and that. Not that much reporting on his actual record in South Bend. A little bit here and there on obviously his contentious relationship with the black residents, as well as a police cover-up. But there's other things going on that isn't getting any attention. So I wanted to ask you, obviously the winter is coming, already really cold in the Midwest. And there's been issues before with the homeless in South Bend having places to go. Can you kind of talk about what's going on there now? And is Pete Buttigieg doing what's necessary to protect public health?
No, and this is actually it's kind of a pattern with him. We had the same problem last year during the polar vortex. You might remember. Unfortunately, a couple things happened last year where the lease didn't come. They didn't apply for the lease for the winter weather amnesty building. It was too late to open when we need weather amnesty in South Bend, Indiana. We're about 80 miles southeast of Chicago, so we get all the lake effect snow. It's frigid. We get 18 inches, 20 inches. So it wasn't open in time. So that was the first thing that happened last winter while he was out nationally traveling, deciding whether to run for president. When the weather amnesty shelter opened, it was too far for the homeless actually to even walk to it. Most of those folks stay downtown. So then during the polar vortex, all the citizens and the groups that we have, Clara Ross and many wonderful, loving people, pulled together and had to pick these people up and make sure they got to the shelter, made sure they had food. It was a huge community effort. We had schools would shut down here, and the public buses a couple of the drivers volunteered their day, took their school buses, rode around, picked up the homeless, and made sure they got to the amnesty shelter. So last year was very frustrating, and it's something he never acknowledged publicly, that we were doing his job for him. So we would have expected better this year. But again, the weather amnesty shelter is a nighttime shelter. It opens at 7 p.m. and it closes at 7:45 a.m. These folks have nowhere to go for almost 12 hours in frigid weather. Not only that, the library, which is in center downtown, which is where they could usually just walk in, use the restroom, warm up, is closed for reconstruction and renovations. So there's no place for these folks to go for almost 12 hours. So people are, trying to ask churches to open their doors because it gets deadly cold here. And, there was a tent city underneath the viaduct, and that was destroyed by the city, where we had folks for the homeless put pallets down so they would be up off the cement for the freezing cold. Pete gave a lot of money for a big study on the homeless, and then did not take the recommendations at all. And you can research that. So it's been very disappointing that our most marginalized people here in South Bend don't have a voice, except for just citizens coming together.
And it's interesting and kind of alarming because you have somebody running to oversee 330 million people, but you're describing kind of a makeshift citizen effort in a city of 100,000 because the mayor isn't doing the basic things, making sure enough homeless shelters are open, making sure it's in easy enough walking distance, or there's transportation to get homeless people there without, basically benevolent, kind bus drivers and residents, people could die out in the cold in those kinds of temperatures with the wind chill that you're talking about coming from Chicago. Has he ever spoken about this or had to answer for this in South Bend?
Well, I know Claire Ross, she's a every day she's advocating for the homeless. She was able to get them to donate, give out transpo bus tickets for the homeless so they can get to the shelters for free. But that's the only thing that we've had accomplished this year, which is not a small thing, but come on, it's city buses. They can at least let the homeless take them for free to get warm. It's a big problem. And I think you'll find what I try to talk about on social media is that time and time again, Pete tends to have like a blind spot, almost a lack of empathy where he's not thinking ahead until a situation arises. And then it's, a lot of publicity, throwing money into studies. But what you see is not a lot of change here. He got voted in by 8,000 votes. We're a town of over 100,000 people. So we have voter apathy. We have increasing poverty. We have the violence has increased 40% from this time last year, shootings. And so those citizens around the country that are concerned with gun control or answers to gun violence are not going to find it from a mayor from South Bend. We had a mass shooting here. Right after Eric Logan was shot and killed by the police. Within a month, we had a mass shooting. I could hear it from my bedroom.
And for those that don't know, Eric Logan was a black man shot by South Bend police. As far as I know, nothing's really been done about that.
No, he did allow or did request a special investigator. And we're, of course, everyone's trying to be patient with any word, but we've not heard any word on the progress of that investigation if there was police wrongdoing. And for your folks that don't know, the officer that shot Eric Logan did not have his body cam on. And the summer prior, we had paid, I think it was $1.8 million for this body camera system for our police for exactly these kinds of reasons. And not only did the officer, shoot Eric Logan, him and another responding officer threw Eric Logan in the back of the police patrol car and took him to the hospital, which was like 2 blocks away, instead of allowing for an ambulance to come. So there's a lot of questions that and a lot of distrust in our community. And even though Pete has addressed some of that, it's been in response to, instead of proactively seeing what's coming ahead and addressing.
Would you think it's fair to say, because what I'm hearing, you have a mayor, I mean, obviously he's a politician, they're all ambitious, they're all thinking about the next position, but you have a mayor of a small city, but basically as early as 2 years ago, he's preoccupied. He's running for DNC chair. That didn't work out, but during that period, he starts kind of establishing and paving, the road to run for president. It seems establishing donor networks and possible staff and an infrastructure 2 years ago. So if you're running for DNC chair, kind of establishing your infrastructure to run for president 3 years later, you're not exactly a full-time mayor. You're focused on other things. So as a result, you're not really thinking, we got to get everything in place for the winter for the homeless, or what's the status of the police body cam, updating the policy, which I know you put in a freedom of information request for. But you are, in the corner of your eye, how's the downtown gentrification going? Because South Bend, like many other cities, it's basically an economic Hunger Games, and they're beautifying, 10 to 15 blocks downtown and leaving the rest of the city to rot. Am I describing this? Am I overplaying it, or do you feel he's basically been preoccupied with his political ambition?
I would say he's been preoccupied, but at the same time, I don't think that would make a difference. I mean, this is his 8th year. He's about finished with his 2nd term. He's had plenty of time to address these things, but have not. And if you look at his record, diversity decreased in his administration. Black unemployment rose to 11%. We have 40% of our population here in South Bend is Black residents who have considerable obstacles ahead of them. And in this city, we've had the gentrification. We've had him, bulldoze 1,000 houses in 1,000 days and spend his time prettying up the city, which is a lot like what Republican mayors do. So if you look at his ongoing record, it's just not positive. I can tell you, for instance, the Minority and Women Enterprise Board, which was created by Steve Lucky, who was before Buttigieg, to increase minority and women business contractors here with the city of South Bend. Under Pete Buttigieg, the last 2.5 years, they never met. And there is an ordinance saying that they're supposed to give quarterly reports to the mayor so he can ensure they're doing their job. Well, out of 1,831 city vendors registered, 8 of them were Black business owners. 20 of them were women business owners. And we had a budget of $1.9 million that could have been going into these communities, into these small businesses that just got ignored. So there's been many opportunities to uplift our folks here, and people just didn't do their jobs. And
we started the interview talking about basically, the homeless are really screwed by lack of shelter. For some reason, a library is deciding to do construction in the heart of the winter. That library was used for amnesty for the homeless. Can you kind of talk about, in San Francisco and Seattle and many parts of the country? I mean, the homeless work. I mean, they go out and they're working, but they can't afford a place to live. Is the homeless population, has it become more people that actually work part-time jobs and this and that, but just can't afford rent in South Bend, which I'm assuming if they're gentrifying, rent is going up in South Bend? Yeah,
it is. And it's a really sad thing. I mean, you can ask almost anyone who's been a longtime resident in South Bend, and the characteristics of the homeless here has changed. I mean, you have people with degrees, you have folks that have jobs or, just had a little bit of obstacle and now they're on the corner. I mean, we have panhandlers here all over the place, and you'll hear cops say, well, some of them are tricking you. Well, you're always going to have that. And we do have a homeless center downtown, but it requires, certain requirements to be in. And we have chronic homeless folks that aren't going to enter those kinds of programs, but we still have an obligation to their human rights and their dignity and make sure we get them warm. And like I said, he spent a lot of money on a lot of experts to give us this homeless report on how, when he wanted to tear down Tent City under the viaduct, which they did, but they did that and then didn't implement what the report asked them to do, which was to appoint or create a position within city administration that just brought all the different nonprofits and shelters together so that we made sure all the gaps were filled. And he chose not to do that. In other reports that he's had done with these consultants, he asked for no recommendations, so they don't have to feel pressured to follow these. So it's this constant trend with Pete that I like to say, he doesn't like ugly. Mm-hmm. Whether it's poverty, gun violence, homelessness, it gets pushed under the rug to make everything kind of look pretty, but the solutions are not ever brought forth. Now, I want to give a big shout out to Regina Williams-Preston, Oliver Davis, Jordan Geiger. We have a lot of people that if you see progress here, it's because they have continued to raise their voice and fight for these people. And that's the only reason these things are getting done, is because of community pressure.
What I find like such a cognitive dissonance, I heard him do an interview recently, I think it was with the Circus, that Showtime show. And he was talking about, no, we can't go back. He wasn't really attacking Obama, but he said we can't go back to normal. Normal didn't work, meaning the neoliberal Obama era. But everything I'm hearing from Pete Buttigieg, his proposals for president, everything you're describing, mm-hmm. is neoliberal, mm-hmm. is the neoliberal order, is paying lip service with studies and reports and basically a lot of branding and a lot of public relations, but no teeth behind it. What is he proposing on a national level? As somebody who knows what he's done and not done in South Bend, what exactly is he proposing that is so different for, quote, his generation? He likes to talk about my generation as a millennial.
Yeah, I think he feels very proud about being data driven, but we don't need to be data driven. We need to be human driven, right? So you can write policies and procedures, and some of those aren't even correct in the city. But if you're not looking at the human consequence or the results of your 1,000 houses in 1,000 days, then you hurt our most marginalized people. And we've seen that throughout. But what I find is interesting is that Pete Buttigieg has put out this Douglas plan. And you might have seen the Intercept report that they had these endorsements of, prominent Black leaders in South Carolina, which they did not have. And they used pictures from Kenya to promote this email. And that's kind of what we're saying, is that as much as he's trying to befriend the Black community, it's not genuine. And he's not going to win that community. These folks are, no stranger to politicians making promises that are never kept. I mean, they can spot these folks a mile away. So Pete Buttigieg is the very, very last person that should be touting that he knows the plan for Black America. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, our Black citizens here are suffering greatly, and he's throwing money at it the last 3/4 of this year because he's running for president. But he's not had any success. You haven't seen any numbers, whether it's diversity in his administration or the numbers of homeless or the violence here. It's not gotten better.
And I know you can't speak for all of South Bend because how would you know what other people are asked? But I'm curious. Obviously, there's been national media in South Bend. I mean, as he's risen in the polls. Do you get a sense that the national media is inquiring at all or in depth or asking residents about his record in South Bend, these issues? It seems when I see stuff from reporters in South Bend, it's just a lot of fluff.
Yeah, there's been a lot of reporters here. I mean, I had Washington Post in my living room. We've had ABC, CNN, everyone here, and they have highlighted some of the, of course, the Eric Logan situation became very prominent in the national news, and maybe a few other of the items. But no, I mean, I don't know why nobody has printed that our homeless have no daytime winter amnesty in South Bend, Indiana. I mean, and that's why I'm talking to you now. I mean, I'm for all intents and purposes, I'm trying to retire from activism and organizing. But if I can use my voice to get folks warm weather stations during the day, well, I have to do that because otherwise I'll be helping, and I don't mind help. But we need the nation to know this because he only has 2 more months in office in South Bend where we can actually hold him accountable. And I want to mention to your viewers that when Eric Logan died in July of this year, or June, I think June 26th, Blacktivists and Black Lives Matter and Antifa and a bunch of people came together. Eric Logan's family, Tyree Bonds specifically, and Eric's mother, they made lists of demands from Pete. And one of those demands was that we have an empty seat on the Board of Public Safety that had been vacant. And they had demanded a citizen be appointed to that seat because the Board of Public Safety is the place where they vote on disciplining officers and policies and body cams in the fire department. And right now it was kind of stacked with folks that had retired as career police officers and firemen and have an interest in protecting these entities. He asked for public applications. They got 14. They must not have liked them because then they extended the deadline and they got 4 more apparently. He just appointed this person last week, and it's November from July. And this person, while I'm glad it's a woman because it will be the first woman on the board, she's an employee of the city of South Bend. in human resources, and I'm sure she's a lovely person and good-hearted and very capable. But he had agreed verbally to fill that seat with a citizen who can give voice. And that's how he is. He's kind of sneaky, because
There's a show.
right.
There's a show, Sneaky Pete.
Well, I don't know that, but he is sneaky. I mean, they put it out in the press on a Friday. She'd already been sworn in. They had this great picture with the flag behind her, and it just looked right. And I'm sure many people in our community forgot that in July, he promised that would be a citizen seat. So he's already setting up our community for failure for another fight. And I want to add one more thing. I know I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just wanted to say that back in June, I did a public records request to get the body cam policies, and that's kind of my professional policies and procedures are kind of my professional gig. So it took them about a week, and they said that part of my request was not specific enough. And I had asked them for some procedures that were listed on the first page about oversight of the video, who was going to do that, how they were going to be stored, accessed, and this kind of thing. So I put in another request in August, early August, and got specific. I went procedures A through E of this. And I just want to tell your viewers that on September 3rd, I requested on August 9th. I got this on September 3rd, which is a long time for the city outside of their scope of duration of time. And it says to me that they don't have those policies, that those policies were never created. And that's 424.4 A through E of the body cam. And this was for a coordinator to be appointed, which they did have an officer appointed. But they ended up sending me a screenshot of his dash, of his software dash, showing that he had the capability to do those things. But yet they weren't done. So even though they've been working hard to make these policies better for the community, they've had lots of meetings, I'm going to send that to the independent investigator, seeing if the city was liable, culpable, if the officer was liable or culpable for the death of Eric Logan. I mean, these things need to be solid prior to questions of a resident's innocence, guilt, wrongful death, manslaughter. So people need to be held accountable. And even though the officer resigned, the chief of police hasn't been fired over this. What we see time and time again is that officers that have been involved in racist circumstances documented, there is no consequences. I mean, these gentlemen that were involved in this shooting, they had a list, they got, they had a list, and we don't have the citizen seat to speak for the citizens on the Board of Public Safety. So it's just continually disappointing. It's a lot of show and not a lot of resolutions for folks.
Two things. It's amazing to me that you are doing more journalistic work than the journalists there, because I'm pretty sure there are no journalists doing what you're describing. Secondly, I can't speak for the audience, but I think they'll agree. Don't retire quite yet. We need you in the fight. Don't retire from activism. People, it could burn you out with everything else, being a parent and running your life. But we definitely need. I think most viewers, and hopefully when this gets shared broader, would not have known about any of this, and I would not have known unless there are people on the ground informing journalists that want to look into this. So thank you very much for taking the time. I'll keep in touch with you, Arakel Blas.
Wait.
Oh, go ahead.
Can I add one thing real quick?
Yeah.
Can I ask your viewers that if you care about our homeless here and want to lend your voice to our efforts, to please email Mayor Pete at southbendin.gov, and please ask him to immediately provide warming shelters for our homeless for 24/7.
Mayor Pete at southbendin.com.
.gov.
.gov.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Jordan.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.